We were in Ohio that summer, in a rented house 2 hours from where I used to believe I belonged. It sat off a gravel road, hidden behind pines and white-barked birch, with windows that didn't quite close and furniture that smelled faintly of mildew and bleach. Laura had booked it through a site I never used. She said it was charming, cozy, neutral ground. What she meant was, it wasn't ours. What she meant was, it wasn't mine. The invitation had come casually. "My family's doing a little thing," she said, handing me her phone like a receipt I hadn't asked for. "Just dinner. You'll come, right?" I said yes, like I always did. I wore the shirt she once said brought out my shoulders. I brought a bottle of wine. Not too expensive, not cheap either. I even ironed my collar, thinking that might make some invisible difference, the way a soldier straightens their uniform before going into battle. I didn't realize until much later that I wasn't being asked to join the table. I was being called to trial. Laura's mother, Susan, greeted me with her usual brittle warmth. Dry cheek kiss, quick scan of my belt, my shoes, my silence. She asked about my work with the practiced boredom of someone who only listens for failure. Her brother, Alan, made jokes about the drive. Something about my car or how men who marry into families always end up doing the driving. I laughed the way I always did, halfway. The rented house creaked around us. One of those outdated vacation spots with nautical decor, blue and white striped napkins, and framed anchors on the walls as if to warn us not to drift too far from shore. The kind of place where everything looks better in pictures than in person. The kind of place where nothing lasts. We gathered in the dining room around a long wooden table that wobbled when too many elbows leaned in the same direction. Laura had made her signature casserole, the one Kyle always claimed to hate, but took seconds of anyway. Her family brought dishes too. Store-bought desserts, pre-made salad bags still in the plastic. It didn't matter. No one came for the food. Kyle arrived last, as always. No apology, no explanation. Just strolled in like the prodigal son with a backpack slung off one shoulder and sunglasses still perched on his head despite the setting sun. He gave Susan a kiss on the cheek, fist-bumped Alan, and nodded at Laura. When his eyes met mine, they paused, but only for a second. Long enough to let me know that he'd seen me and decided it wasn't worth mentioning. We sat. Small talk filled the room like steam from overboiled water. Laura's brother talked stocks. Susan complained about her lawn service. And Kyle just smirked. He smirked the way kids do when they know the room belongs to them. When they know they can say anything, and the worst they'll get is a soft laugh or a sigh. The wine flowed. Conversation drifted. At one point Laura mentioned our wedding anniversary coming up. 5 years, she said, glancing at me with that tired smile that used to mean something warmer. Susan made a noise. Alan made a toast. To 5 years of putting up with each other, he joked, and everyone laughed. I raised my glass, and then Kyle spoke. He stood, casually, no grand gesture, just lifted his glass and said, "Let's also toast Michael, for being so temporary." The room fell quiet for a second, unsure whether to laugh or wait. Kyle went on. "Seriously," he said, eyes locked on mine. "Props for filling in while it's convenient. Appreciate the effort, man. No hard feelings when the contract's up." And then they laughed. Not awkward chuckles. Not confused smiles. Real laughter. Susan leaned back, grinning like it was the best joke she'd heard all night. Alan actually slapped the table. Laura looked down at her plate, smiling. Not a smirk. A real smile. Like she'd expected it. Like she'd approved it. No one stopped him. No one said a word in my defense. I sat there, holding my glass midair, the cheap wine trembling at the lip. My mouth didn't move. My hands didn't shake. But something in me cracked. Quietly, like wood under pressure. The kind of break that doesn't show right away but splits the structure from within. I didn't respond. Didn't call him out. Didn't ruin their dinner. I just smiled. Raised my glass like a man toasting his own obituary. "To family," I said. "And to clarity." Then I drank. Slowly. Emptied the glass. Let the silence spread just long enough to sting. Dessert came. I didn't touch it. I listened to Kyle tell a story about his friends back in Columbus. I nodded at Susan when she asked if I needed more wine. I even laughed when Alan made another half-hearted joke about earning my keep. I played the part. I stayed until the candles had burned halfway down and the casserole dishes had started to crust over. Then I stood. "Thanks for the evening," I said. I kissed Laura on the cheek. She smiled at me like nothing had happened. Like her son hadn't just spit in my face with a room full of witnesses. She didn't ask why I was leaving early. She didn't offer to come with me. She didn't say a thing. I walked out the front door, down the creaking wooden steps, into the Ohio night. The cicadas were loud. The stars were few. My car sat parked where I had left it, silent, faithful. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away without looking back. No one called after me. No one texted, because Kyle hadn't told a joke. He'd told the truth. The kind of truth teenagers are rarely bold enough to say out loud unless they're sure, absolutely sure, that the adults in the room agree with them. He said I was temporary, and the laughter proved it. That night, the drive back to my apartment felt longer than it was. The road stretched out like a question I didn't want to answer. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't roll down the windows. I just drove, my hands fixed at 10 and 2. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might splinter. I thought about every late bill I had paid without complaint. Every favor I'd said yes to. Every trip I'd driven Kyle to. Every lie I'd swallowed so Laura wouldn't have to choose between her son and her husband. Temporary. Placeholder. A man-shaped gap filler until the next phase of their lives sorted itself out. That's what I was. And I had known it for years. I'd felt it in the way Kyle never called me anything at all. Not Dad. Not Michael. Not even hey. Just silence. Or smirks. Or those little moments where he'd say, "Your wife," instead of "Mom." Just to remind me who belonged to who. I let it slide. Every time. Because I thought love could outlast resentment. I thought if I showed up every day, if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, stayed long enough, they'd come around. That eventually, the weight of my presence would matter more than the absence of someone else's blood. I see now what a fool I was. They didn't want a stepfather. They wanted a sponsor. A mute, reliable fixture who didn't ask for respect. Only permission. And that night, as Kyle's words replayed in my head, "Appreciate the effort, man. No hard feelings when the contract's up." I realized he wasn't mocking me. He was warning me. And for the first time, I was ready to listen. I got back to my apartment just after 10. Quiet building, second floor, beige walls, a view of the parking lot and a dumpster that overflowed every Thursday. It wasn't home. It wasn't meant to be. It was where I went when I needed space from them. From her. From the version of me I'd been rehearsing for years. Provider, helper, second choice savior. I sat in the dark for a long time. Didn't even take my shoes off. Just lowered myself into the chair by the window. Let the weight of Kyle's voice replay in the silence. Temporary. Filling in while it's convenient. I used to think I could stomach anything if it kept Laura's world from falling apart. I used to believe that standing in as a father was something noble, something that didn't require applause to be worth doing. But I also used to believe they saw me, that they knew what I gave up, what I carried. That lie died the moment they left. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Noticed something strange. A string of login attempts I hadn't made. My email, my cloud drive, even an old shared storage folder Laura once asked me to make for her taxes. I frowned. Opened my laptop. More alerts. Login attempts from new devices. A notification that someone had tried and failed to reset the password to a bank portal I rarely used anymore. It was subtle, like a thief testing doorknobs. Nothing taken yet. But someone had their hand on the latch. I changed the passwords. Every one of them. Two-factor authentication. New recovery email. Full sweep. Then I opened the shared folders. Empty. A folder I used to store scanned documents, bills, tuition agreements, insurance forms, gone. Deleted. Just enough to look like an accident. Just enough to make me doubt myself. But I didn't doubt. Not this time. Because I knew who had access. I had given it willingly, years ago, when Laura needed copies of Kyle's school records. Or Susan wanted to get a look at what was covered under the family health plan. I was trying to help, to be useful. That's how it always started. I stared at the screen for a long time, watching the little blinking cursor in the search bar as if it could explain everything. It didn't need to. I already knew. They were preparing for something, or hiding something, or both. I didn't sleep that night, just sat up, combing through bank records, old agreements, loan guarantees, co-signed forms I'd forgotten I ever signed. My name was everywhere, neatly woven into the fabric of their security. Credit cards, rent agreements, Kyle's tuition account. Even Laura's mother had added me as a backup guarantor on a medical plan, just in case. They had used my name like a bridge, walked over it so often they forgot it had a weight limit. I spent the next few hours untying every knot they'd wrapped around me. One by one, I pulled my name off the accounts, closed cards, froze lines of credit, removed my credentials from platforms I hadn't touched in months. I revoked access to shared folders, backup drives, cloud keys. Everything. No emails. No explanations. No warnings. If I was temporary, then I would vanish like one. By the time the sun came up, I had documented everything, *TS, download logs, timestamps. Not because I planned to confront them, but because I wanted a record. Something cold and factual. Something that wouldn't gaslight me later. And then the phone rang. Laura. I let it go to voicemail. Then Susan. Twice. Then Laura again. No one leaves 3 voicemails before breakfast unless something's broken. I played the first one on speaker. Hey. It's me. Just calling because I think Kyle's having some issues with the Rent app. He said the portal isn't loading and I thought maybe it was just a server thing. Anyway, just give me a call. Okay? Love you. Second one. Hi Michael, it's Susan. Listen, I'm not sure what's going on, but my insurance login locked me out this morning and it says I'm no longer an authorized user under the family plan. I tried calling the provider, but they wouldn't give me information. Can you please call me back and explain? This has to be a mistake. Third one. More urgent. Michael. What the hell is going on? Kyle just tried to get groceries and his card was declined. His school dashboard won't open either. I called the bursar's office and they said the payment was reversed. Did something happen? Did you forget to update something? Call me. Now. I didn't. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the far wall. Watched the light shift across the paint. Watched a spider crawl across the molding like it had more purpose than I did. The calls kept coming. Laura. Susan. Alan. Even Kyle finally. One text. No punctuation. No greeting. Did you mess with my tuition? I didn't answer. Because this wasn't confusion. It was consequence. They weren't trying to check on me. They weren't worried about my health or my feelings or why I left dinner without a word. They weren't wondering if I was okay after being humiliated in front of people I used to call family. They were calling because the gears had stopped turning. And the man they thought would always keep cranking the engine had let go of the wheel. By noon, my inbox was flooded with reminders. Rent confirmations that didn't go through. Alerts from the school's finance office. Friendly messages from platforms I hadn't seen in years. Looks like you missed a payment. Your saved payment method no longer works. Update now to avoid service interruption. Each one made me feel lighter, like a weight was being peeled off my skin, layer by layer. Around 2 o'clock, Laura texted again. Longer this time. Michael, I don't know what you're doing, but you're scaring Kyle. He's freaking out. If this is about last night, we should talk. You left so suddenly. Maybe it came out wrong. Just, can we please talk before this gets worse? Before this gets worse. Worse for who? Kyle, whose apartment was paid for by a man he didn't respect. Susan, who had quietly stapled my name to her hospital bills like a sticky note. Or Laura, who stood silent while her son dragged my name through the dirt in front of people she cared about more than me. I didn't reply. I opened a new document and wrote a single line at the top. I am no longer part of your decisions. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I copied it into an email. Sent it to Laura. Blind copied my attorney. attached a file with revoked authorizations and account closures, just in case they tried to twist the narrative later. No threats, no insults, just facts. I didn't wait for a reply. By evening, the tone of their messages had shifted. Panic bled into them. Kyle wrote, "What the hell, man? This is messed up. I needed that money. You can't just drop everything like this." Laura followed with, "Can we just meet? Please, we can fix this. You're overreacting." Even Alan chimed in, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but maybe we can sit down. No need to make this bigger than it is." Bigger than it is. It was already massive. It had been for years. I had just refused to see it. They had built a life on my silence. A structure of entitlement wrapped in guilt, with me as the invisible pillar keeping the roof from caving in. And I had let them. Until the night Kyle smiled and reminded me I was disposable. That was the final straw. Not the insult, but the applause that followed. Told me everything. They weren't surprised by what he said. They had just never expected me to hear it with both ears. Now they were hearing something new. The absence of my name on every dotted line they had once quietly signed in my shadow. And that silence was starting to hurt. By morning, they were done pretending. Gone were the polite texts and guilt-wrapped voicemails. What replaced them was blunt, frantic need, the tone people use when the power goes out and they finally realize who paid the electric bill. Kyle called 3 times before I even had my coffee. Then came the messages. Short, sharp, urgent. "They're freezing my student account. Can't register. Rent portal says I'm in breach. Why did you cancel the autopay? Dude, answer your phone. This is serious. Dude, I was man last night. Now I was dude. Not dad, not Michael, not even you. Just an anonymous function that used to spit money when kicked hard enough." I didn't respond. I made eggs instead. Sat at the chipped counter in my apartment, sunlight creeping across the tile, and ate in silence. For the first time in years, I tasted my food. For the first time in years, the silence didn't ache. Then the doorbell rang. Laura. I knew it before I opened the door. She stood there in a loose cardigan, her arms crossed, eyes already red, like she'd been crying since breakfast but didn't want to let me see the whole flood. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't put back together. "I didn't come to fight," she said. I stepped aside. She walked in like she used to live there, and she had once briefly during the early months before Kyle moved in and the shape of our lives got complicated. She stood in the center of the room, not quite sure where to sit. "You really cut everything off?" I nodded. Didn't offer coffee. Didn't ask if she'd eaten. "He could get evicted, Michael." I raised an eyebrow. "He could also get a job." She winced. "That's not fair. You know he's in school." I cut her off, quiet but firm. "No, Laura. What's not fair is expecting me to fund a future in which I don't exist." She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but the words got stuck. I could see the math in her head, the years, the money, the miles I drove, the bills I paid. And then, Kyle's smirk. The laughter. The look on her face when she didn't defend me. She sat down slowly, clasped her hands together. "I know what he said was wrong." "He didn't say it in a vacuum," I replied. "He said it with confidence. He said it knowing no one would stop him. And he was right." Her voice cracked. "He's just a kid." "No," I said. "He's a man when he wants freedom, and a child when he wants rescue. And you let him swing between both depending on what's convenient." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You think this is my fault?" I said. "You taught him I was optional." The room went still. A long, bitter silence stretched between us. She finally looked away. "We didn't mean for it to be like this," she whispered. "But it was," I replied. "For years." She didn't cry then. That came later. She left with a whisper. "Just think about what you're doing." I already had. By that evening, the panic began to spread. The school called Kyle's emergency contact, which used to be me, and found nothing. Susan emailed me a medical bill labeled urgent. Alan sent a rambling voice memo offering to mediate things, like this was a boardroom dispute. not the unraveling of my entire life. And then came the message I had been expecting, but still felt like a nail in the chest. Call again. I reached out to Dad. He said he doesn't have the funds. Told me to be a man and figure it out. So, thanks for that. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Be a man. It came from the same ghost they all claimed to revere. The same father who vanished every time a tuition deadline loomed or a medical form needed a signature. The one whose blood gave him permanent status, even as my sweat was called temporary. Now Kyle had gone to him and found nothing. That was the moment I knew it had clicked. Not fully, not deeply, but enough to sting. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, out of respect. Let the lesson land without noise. Let the silence speak louder than I ever could. The next day, Laura called again. This time she didn't ask. You made your point, she said, her voice raw. He knows he crossed a line. Which one? I asked. The one between gratitude and entitlement? Or the one between mother and accomplice? Her silence was the answer. Then her voice dropped, softer. He hasn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. I brought him groceries. He didn't say much. He doesn't say much unless he needs something. She didn't argue, and I didn't offer help. That night, they stopped asking. The begging turned to blaming. Kyle texted, "You're pathetic. Thought you were better than this. Guess not." Then, hope it was worth it. Burning everything down just to prove a point. That was the last message I got. Because after that, the panic turned to avoidance. The silence I used to beg for. The quiet I once thought would K*L me, returned. But now it was different. It didn't feel like absence anymore. Felt like freedom. Because here's the truth. I didn't burn anything down. I just stopped holding up the walls. And they collapsed all on their own. It was 3 days before the next knock came. Late evening. My apartment wrapped in the soft blue haze of a dying sun. I'd left the door unlocked. Not for hope. Not for welcome. Just habit. The old part of me still expecting someone to come home. Kyle didn't knock. He just stepped inside. No backpack. No coat. Just a hoodie 2 sizes too large and shoes worn nearly flat. His hair was unwashed. His eyes rimmed with sleep and something heavier. Hunger maybe. Or shame. But I didn't move. I stayed where I was, on the couch, reading the same line of a book I hadn't touched in years. He stood by the door like a boy waiting for a punishment he didn't believe in. I get it, he said. I closed the book. Watched him carefully. I messed up, he added. I said things I shouldn't have. I didn't mean all of it. I was just, I don't know, trying to be funny, I guess. Trying. Always trying. Never doing. He looked down at his shoes, then back up. Can we just reset? Like, start over? The words hung in the air like a fragile thread. The kind of thread you used to hang family portraits. The kind that always snaps first when the weight gets real. I stood, walked to the kitchen. He followed. I poured 2 glasses of water, slid one across the counter. He took it with both hands. Drank too fast, like it was the first honest thing he'd swallowed in weeks. Then he said it. The thing I had once dreamed of hearing. Back when I still believed words could patch holes. You were right. It was soft, sincere, and far too late. I nodded, slowly. And, he blinked. And, I'm sorry. I took a long breath. Let the silence stretch. Then, do you know what sorry buys, Kyle? He shook his head. Nothing, I said. Not rent. Not tuition. Not trust. Nothing. He shrank a little, and for the first time in years, I saw him not as the boy who mocked me, but as what he truly was. A child raised in a house that never asked for consequence. A boy whose father taught him absence, and whose mother taught him to excuse it. I want to fix it, he said. Tell me what to do. I leaned on the counter, folded my arms. You can't fix it. You can only live in what's left. He looked up, eyes rimmed red now. So that's it, he said. You're just done? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure what done meant anymore. Was I done as his provider? I had been for days. Was I done pretending? That ended the moment the table laughed. But done as in washed of all feeling? No, that was the cruelty. I still cared. But caring without respect is a trap. A leash they hand you with a thank you smile, just tight enough to choke. Kyle stepped back, pulled out his phone. I talked to the school, he said. If I can get a partial payment in by Friday, they'll hold my spot. Just enough to cover the dorm and fall registration. His eyes searched mine, desperate. I'm not asking you to pay all of it. Just help, please. I'll pay you back. You won't, I said. He didn't argue, and that told me he knew I was right. He left without slamming the door. A small mercy. That night Laura called. I answered this time. You saw him, she said. Yes. Silence. I didn't tell him to go. He went on his own. I didn't respond. She went on. He's scared. You scared him. Good, I said. Fear grows where entitlement dies. She flinched. I could hear it in her breath. This wasn't how I thought things would end, she whispered. I almost laughed. You thought they'd never end at all. More silence. Then, I think about that night a lot. The dinner. The laugh. I should have said something. You did, I replied. You said it when you smiled. She started to cry. Soft, the way she always cried when she couldn't argue anymore. I never wanted to choose between you. You didn't, I said. You just never chose me. She begged then. Not for money that was already gone. She begged for the idea of what we used to be. For the image of a family she could still show to her friends. A man who stayed. A boy who learned. A mother who held it all together. But that was never our story. Our story was built on substitutions. I substituted as a father. She substituted as a partner. Kyle substituted love with tolerance. And I substituted pride with quiet desperation. It was never built to last. And now it had collapsed under the weight of its own pretending. I didn't hang up. I let her cry until she was done. Then I said, "Don't call again unless it's real." She asked, "What's real?" "Responsibility," I said. "Gratitude, consequence." She said nothing after that. The line clicked. Silence. Weeks passed. Kyle didn't text again. Neither did Laura. I got letters from the school. Final notices. They weren't addressed to me anymore. The system had caught up with the shift. My name was gone. So was the obligation. One day, a new couple moved into the apartment across the hall. I helped them carry a dresser. The husband thanked me twice. The wife offered a bottle of water. The kind of small gestures I hadn't seen in years. That night, I sat on the couch, turned off my phone, and watched the city breathe through the window. No shouting, no calls, no reminders of who I failed to be. Only space, only stillness. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for the old routines. Logging into Kyle's Bursar account, checking the rent portal, scrolling old photos from holidays where I was half-cropped out of the frame. Then I stop, because I know what I was. I was never a father to them. I was an insurance policy. I was a faceless draft in the wind, only noticed when I didn't arrive. I was the name they didn't say in public. The thank you they never offered. The foundation they assumed was part of the architecture, until I stepped away and the roof cracked open. And now I am gone. Not in the way they feared, in the way they created. I gave them everything. Time, money, presence, restraint. They gave me silence. So I gave them silence in return. Now I ask you, whoever hears this, whoever has carried someone else's children, someone else's burden, was I wrong to leave? Was I cruel to let the consequences finally speak? Or was this the only way left to teach them something they never wanted to learn? Would you have stayed? Would you have endured it? Or would you, like me, have finally stopped pretending to be what they never saw in the first place?